What's up, everybody? This is Chubz. Welcome back, finally back, to another episode of In Plain View. Today is a special day because we have finally recruited one of our best friends onto the show. Guys, I just want to welcome Frost on. Say what's up, Frost.
What's up, guys? Proud to be here. So excited to be a part of this journey. As a fellow man-child who never really grew up, I'm so excited to be taking this trip with two of my favorite people in the world, talking about my favorite thing in the world, and that's pop culture, movies, comics, things of that nature. I just can't thank Chubbs and Brandon enough for this opportunity.
Absolutely, man. And I know I speak on behalf of Brandon, too, when I say we are extremely grateful to have you. You are such an asset to this team, this camp. Man, you bring so much expertise and strong knowledge, opinions into this group, man. So we're grateful to have you. Guys, what we do on In Plain View is we talk about all things pop culture, any nerd fandom. If you dig it, we probably talk about it. And I do want to say before we kick off our episode today of our official Suicide Squad review, because we got a lot to talk about with it, I do want to say that, guys, right off the rip, you guys feel free to talk about this in the comments with us. We want to bring you into this and make you a part of this as well. So please feel free to interact with us. We want to give you a piece of this too. And who knows, we might even bring you on for a show one day. So, guys, this is a podcast that is made for you, for fellow nerds. As Frost put it best, fellow man-childs or woman-childs. So you can come on and just geek out with us and be nerdy. We're going to geek out on Suicide Squad today. So let's get right into it. Frost.
Yes.
Any beginning opinions about the movie? Anything you want to just let out, man? Your thoughts watching this movie?
Yeah, well, my initial thoughts when I initially heard that James Gunn had jumped ship to DC and was going to make a soft reboot, if you will, of the Suicide Squad was I was excited. I obviously enjoy Mr. Gunn's work, what he's done with Guardians of the Galaxy, and I don't want to say I was disappointed with David Ayers' version of Suicide Squad, the first movie from the DCEU, but I feel like it didn't necessarily hit all the notes that we as fans wanted it to hit.
Right.
So I was really excited to see what James Gunn's take on it was going to be, and I've got to say, without going any further into any type of review or spoilers, man, I was pleased with what Gunn delivered for us.
Oh man, absolutely. I believe that word "pleased" might be a bit of an understatement, big guy, because we are psyched about this movie. We had spoke before we got into this that about how we felt about that first movie, about that Ayers movie. Hashtag release the Ayers cut. I like the movie. I appreciate the cult following that it had. Instant cult classic. Awesome soundtrack to go along with that. Help that out. I'm a big soundtrack guy. I love scores and composers and all that. But the movie itself, the first movie itself, wasn't as up to par as this, and that's all James Gunn. That's all we have. We have nothing but praises. Wayne's World, we are not worthy. We're not worthy. James Gunn took this and ran with it, man. I wasn't too ecstatic when I first heard that he was going to do it because I am a Marvel loyalist, as so to speak, and I was like, "What?" And that was when all the controversy was going on. Gratefully, Marvel was smart enough to reel him back in to get him in for that Guardians Christmas special as well as Guardians 3. But man, am I excited for what he might potentially do with DC, guy.
Without a doubt. I think before we jump into the new movie, it might serve us well to go back and revisit the first movie. And the reason why I say that is one of the critiques I believe a lot of people had with the first movie and with the DCEU in general is how dark it is. And I feel like Ayers, when he took on the Suicide Squad, he wanted to do something that was a diametric opposition to what Marvel had done with big team up tentpole movies. You know, and this is no knock on Marvel,
Right,
but
right, right.
you know, the Avengers movies are big and colorful and almost cartoonish uh, in their composition. They're bright and hopeful, and I feel like Ayers with that first Suicide Squad movie tried to do a complete 180 from that and do a very dark and gritty uh, film based on these really evil or villainous characters.
Right.
And I feel like he accomplished what he set out to do, but it just didn't ring true for most people. Um, and I feel like that is where many of the critiques of that first movie come from. So, Chubbs, I'd have to ask you, if you had to pick one fault of that first movie, what would it have been for you?
So what comes to mind when I think about the comparisons is, I believe it was you, honestly, that said this, that Marvel movies feel like a movie about comic books, and DC kind of feels like it's more, I don't want to say cinematic, but it felt like that first movie had more Hollywood in it. It had too much Hollywood in it. Not no disrespect to what David Ayers did, but it felt like it was too, I don't know, it didn't really grasp the fun aspect of Suicide Squad. It didn't grasp the what we love about comic book movies. You know, and certain movies need that serious, darker tone for it to tell the story it needs to. Instant example, the Dark Knight series. It needed that darker tone to get the what it needed. But I guess my first beef with it would be that I don't know, it felt too commercialized, if that makes sense. It felt like it didn't have as much heart as other properties we love. And we know Gunn is awesome for taking characters that nobody cared about and bringing them so much heart. So he did well with this, man. They could have not have got a better person to do this. But yeah, that's my take. My only thing with the first one, man, wasn't a big fan of the villain. Didn't care too much for the not really building the villain up that well, which DC usually does very well. But yeah, that was my only take. But I mean, it just felt like it was too Hollywood. It wasn't grass rooted. It wasn't homegrown cooked. It was too Hollywood for me. I don't know.
Well, I feel like, and I understand what you're saying, I feel like that feeling comes through because you took these characters and that first movie almost tore all the heart away from these characters. Which I think is one of the great things Gunn has done in this new movie. Uh, you know, I can't say enough about what a genius James Gunn is. And now, before any of you listeners out there think, oh, these guys are just James Gunn fans and they're just going to be praising him, well, you may be right, but it really is his gift that he can reach into the back catalog of these huge universes and pull out these characters that when you hear them for the first time, you think, there's no way you can make a movie with those guys.
Man, nail on the head, dude. And you know, Robert, go ahead.
When I first heard they were doing Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, I heard that and I was like, what are they thinking? You know, Guardians of the Galaxy, I had read some of the comics and they were good comics, but I couldn't fathom how they were going to make a summer tentpole blockbuster movie out of Guardians of the Galaxy.
Out of a character named Groot.
Well, you know, and this was even before we knew who the lineup was going to be.
Yeah.
So
true.
when I first heard this, I pulled out the Marvel Encyclopedia and a couple of other reference books, and I started looking at it. I was like, okay, well, they could use this guy, you know, maybe this character, this girl, you know. I can see how they can make a movie out of this, kind of hand picking from the entirety of the Guardians of the Galaxy. And I couldn't have been more wrong. When they announced uh, who was going to be in it, and they were like Rocket Raccoon, I was like, what? Rocket Raccoon? And then Groot. I mean, who else in Hollywood could take a talking raccoon and a walking tree and make the movie that Guardians of the Galaxy turned out to be?
Yeah, man, absolutely. Just it blew us all away. And I don't care how big a comic book fan you are, you probably wasn't one of the very few people on this planet that was like, yep, I knew it. I knew it all along that one day my characters I love would get a movie, because nobody's seen it coming. But like you said, that just attests to, if we're going to talk about Suicide Squad, we got to give the man credit, man. So yeah, we might ride his coattails a little bit. We're gonna give the man praise, credit where credit's due. We're gonna do that a couple of times in this episode. While it's fresh on my mind, Frost, I do want to give credit to Warner Brothers, man. I think this movie was born and bred out of mistakes, I feel like. Because with the mess, the confusion and mess that was the backstage of Suicide Squad, Justice League, I think they realized there was way too many cooks in the kitchen. I think they realized that they needed a Kevin Feige. They needed people they could let have free reign, which is why everybody loves the Snyder Cut so much, because it was his vision, right? So I think with Suicide Squad, man, they realized they needed to give this man reins. They needed to give him his creative ability. He probably wouldn't have came on board if it wasn't for that anyways. But, I mean, let's be real, it's James Gunn. But, I mean, I think this movie, I got to give some kudos to Warner Brothers for finally letting these filmmakers make films without too much direction and telling them what needs to be done. And so kudos to them for that.
Yes, and, ever since Patty Jenkins made the Wonder Woman movies, I feel like Warner Brothers has kind of loosened the reins a little bit. Yep. And if by some miracle somebody even distantly related to someone at Warner Brothers were to hear this and pass it on to me, if I, as a fan who spends money on your products, could give you any type of advice or a wish list, it would be that you let your directors and your writers tell the stories they want to tell. Don't be so wrapped up in what you want your company to look like. Let the stories tell themselves, and that will make your company look like what you want it to look like, instead of being a controlling art house type of studio. And I know our brother Brandon, he can't be with us because he's under the weather a little bit. But speaking of art house films and Warner Brothers, I'm gonna go ahead and put this out there for Brandon because he's not able to put it out there for himself. Joker sucked.
Joker sucks.
And I'm talking about sucking on the level of like a black hole. If joy and happiness in comic book movies was light, the Joker movie was a black hole. It let no joy or happiness escape. And me and Brandon have talked many times about this, and I know we're kind of getting off subject. But it's all comic book related, so.
That's right.
But, that movie would have been great, and I could have enjoyed it, and I could have given them all the credit in the world if his name had been, Grumpy
Chuckles.
and Chuckles or something like that, and it hadn't have been in Gotham City, and they had never mentioned Bruce Wayne. Had they done those three things, it would have been a beautiful film about mental illness.
Exactly, man.
But trying to do what they did with quite possibly one of the most iconic villains or characters, for that matter, in all of comics. It made me sick. It sickened me to see that. Only slightly more than Jared Leto with a smile tattooed on the back of his hand.
Yeah.
Which brings us full circle back to Suicide Squad.
Yep. So we just want to throw that out there. Joker sucks. If you don't believe us, you're lying to yourself. You only like it because somebody you work with or one of your friends said they liked it, so you're just going along with it. So it's got to become clean and admit that the film was garbage. And the sooner you do that, the closer you will be to happiness. So
and
right
if you can't admit that, I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and tell you, you're probably going to get insulted and get your feelings hurt listening to this podcast. I'm not saying I want you to turn away or to tune us out or whatever, but yeah, Joker sucks, and I'm not apologizing for that.
And we will never apologize. And it's not like guys are. We're not like, our opinions are facts. It's not that. It's just that when it comes to the Joker, our opinions are facts, and the Joker sucks. So
yes, yeah. Most of our opinions are ours and ours alone. But I feel like that this is the opinion that everyone should have. Joker sucks. That's the end of the story. If they write another one, which God forbid, I've heard they're going to. I'm at a loss for words.
Yep, because they could easily take that money and pump it right back into Suicide Squad 3.
Yes, and that is exactly what they need to do. So, with that being said, Chubz, when you first heard they were making this remake, what was your... I know you said earlier you weren't very enthused, but as the movie was coming along and we started getting more and more information, what was your feelings about it? Were you excited?
I remember exactly. I was actually at work in my office, and I seen a news article about it. I think I was taking like a lunch break or something, and I was like, the feeling was very neutral. So I clicked, I decided I'd buy it. I clicked on the link, and I read some of the characters that they were tossing around doing, and instantly I started to feel excited. As long as it wasn't that original cast, minus Harley Quinn, she's the exception to all of this. She's the constant. Got to have Harley. Hope they never decide to get rid of her. Please, Margot Robbie, stick with him as long as you can because you're glorious and beautiful. But I was excited. I'm a big CW guy, DC, so I was excited to see what King Shark was going to bring. I thought the casting was hilarious. Didn't know a whole lot about a lot of these other characters, though. So I had to kind of get into that, and it was fun, though. I was excited for a new movie, and it seemed like it was going to be fun. And then when I heard who was going to be doing this film, I was, after I realized that, of course, that Marvel had secured Gunn for a few more movies, I was excited. At first, I was like, okay, this is going to be Suicide Squad 2. It's probably going to be all the same. They will probably get another, song like Heathens for the trailer, and it'll just be dark. And then I was like, okay, this is going to be something different. This is going to be something special, and I'm here for it. That was my original take when I first heard about the film.
When I first heard about the film, I too was sitting at my computer at work, and I remember very clearly the blurb was Warner Brothers hires James Gunn to direct the Suicide Squad, and I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. And I got to thinking, and they were talking about it. It was going to be a soft reboot and everything. I was like, well, that's cool. But I'm like you. Once they started releasing information about the characters, man, I was psyched. I was afraid, just like you, that they might come in and they might do several of the same cast members, and man, I was like, that's not Task Force X. To me, to me, the heart of that story and what one of the things I love about that concept is that it's always somebody different. And, you know, I remember very early on one of the characters that, had been tossed out and, I was excited for was Calendar Man, uh, which we did get in the movie, but not in the way, some of us might have wanted or expected. Uh, but then they were going to do like the Polka Dot Man, and I got really excited because some of these are characters that have existed in the DC universe for decades, and for those of us who have grown up on comics, some of these characters aren't as obscure as many people today think they are. And I was just very excited. And then when they announced that they were going to do King Shark, instead of like Killer Croc, I got really excited.
Oh, yeah.
And, one of the things that excited me about it was how were they going to bring this character to life? Because one of my critiques with the first movie, was Killer Croc. Now, don't get me wrong, the guy who played him, I feel like, played the character well. Maybe a little too articulate for me, because for me, Killer Croc was never that verbal or that well spoken as the character was in that movie. But the look of him, I didn't care for. So I was really excited to see how they did King Shark, but I had a little bit of trepidation there too because I was afraid they were going to make him well spoken and verbose the way they did Killer Croc. Yep, and then I got really scared when I heard that Sylvester Stallone had been cast to do King Shark. I was like, there's no way they're going to pay Stallone to come do this and not give him lines. But God bless James Gunn and the creative minds behind this, because Sylvester Stallone just muttering the word bird, one of the most hilarious things ever.
Absolutely,
because his voice is so recognizable. And I was just really pleased and interested with as more and more information began coming out about the movie.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. And I thought that casting was so off the wall ridiculous. I was like, oh no, please don't give us a sad Sylvester was a doctor, then he turned into a shark, like doing marine biology or something. And then when you first hear King Shark in all his gloriousness speak for the first time, read books, so smart I am. You're like, oh god, I love this guy already.
Oh yeah, and and I should have known. I mean, we're talking about a director and writer who hired Vin Diesel to say 3 words.
Exactly.
And has continued to hire him through several movies to say the exact same 3 words. Which to me is part of the genius of that character.
It is, man.
But I just, the more and more I saw of this movie, the more and more I got excited about it. And one of the things that I love about this movie is how the feeling it elicits from me, and how it brings me back to my childhood and how I got into comics. I don't know about.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how you and Brandon got into comics when you were a kid. I'm a little bit older than the two of you, but for me, my introduction to comics was my mom and dad would wake me up early on a Saturday morning, and we would go out and we would do what they call yard selling or going to flea markets. And my introduction to comics when I was a kid was going to these flea markets and buying up back issues of comics for 5 cents a piece or whatever it is. My dad would hand me a $10 bill and be like, "That's all you get for the day," and I would go spend it all on comics. And when you buy these things at a flea market, or even back when they used to be at the newsstands at like gas stations and stuff, you might go in and pick up issue 103, and you could read that issue, and the great thing about it was those issues were normally standalone stories. Even though they were taking place in a greater universe, they were a standalone story. In today's comics, it seems like everything is about universal crossovers and everything, and you really got to read almost every book a company puts out to really be invested in the overall arc for that year.
Yep.
But back when I got into comics, each book was a standalone story. And to me, that's what this movie is like. Even though it is technically a sequel or a soft reboot that exists in the DCEU, it's a standalone story. It's a standalone comic book. It's, it's picking up a comic because the cover's interesting and reading it and discovering characters you never knew you wanted. And to me, that's the glory of this new Suicide Squad movie.
Absolutely, man. And just people that were, we had talked about this earlier. I feel like Gunn was that kid who had like hand me down WWF action figures and like just G.I. Joe characters, and was like, cool, I'm gonna make stories out of these guys, and he does such a good job at that, man.
Speaking of
Especially in
which,
this film,
the way he designed TDK makes me believe he was a big Masters of the Universe guy, and he lost the arms off of them a lot, because when Nathan Fillion dislocates his arms and sends them to fight, the bones sticking out of the sides look just like the shoulder joints on a Masters of the Universe figure.
He had to have done that, man. He had to have done that. He probably told his brother, who was in this film as well, he was like, man, you know what? If we're finally going to give that G.I. Joe we lost, the mom sold at a yard sale, we're finally going to give him justice with TDK. And Nathan Fillion, he nailed that. That was a little upsetting to see him go so fast, but man, did it serve that film such justice. So I want to talk about that for a minute, Frost, how they geniusly marketed these characters. They marketed these characters, and they promoted them, and then they're all gone in the first 5 minutes. Like, what? And then I'm just like, that's when everybody, including myself, we all fans kind of leaned up a little bit and was like, what? And then it shows the team 2 coming in, and you're just like, does the backtrack of how that team formed, and you're like, oh man, I'm invested. I am officially invested.
The marketing for this was great. And the thing about it was, they didn't try to fool us. They told us during the entire final push up to release, don't get attached.
Yeah.
Don't get attached. And, I don't think many of us really understood, if any of us, understood what that meant.
The gravity of that statement.
For those of you who may not have seen the movie yet and do not want spoilers, now may be the time to find an alternate podcast, because we're about to launch into an analyzation of this movie, and you're going to find out some things you might not want to find out if you haven't seen it yet. For those of you who have seen it, stick around and join us while we're going through this journey, because I can't explain to you how this movie worked, but it did.
Did it ever?
You know, they one of the things about Gunn, and we talked about this earlier too, is in every movie he's done, at least in Marvel and now DC, he fills it with Easter eggs, little cameos, casting Easter eggs, character Easter eggs, you name it. They're all in there, and he filled the promotional team, as it were, with all those Easter eggs, and we should have known something was going to happen. You know, casting wise, the number of people who are in this film and are also in the Guardians of the Galaxy films is ridiculous. And starting off, we can talk about his brother, Mr. Gunn's brother. He, of course, plays the second in command Reaver to Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy. And in this, he actually plays two characters. And I know I mentioned that earlier, and you and Brandon were both kind of taken aback, but he actually plays two characters in the new Suicide Squad.
Yeah, man, tell us about those for the fans who didn't spot it.
So, well, number one, he plays a cameo of Calendar Man. When they're going through Belle Reve and you're seeing some background characters. Calendar Man is there, and that is James Gunn's brother. But he also did the motion capture and was credited as Weasel as well.
That's the one that blew me away, which makes sense after you hear it. You know, he's such a good mocap artist, or actor, I should say.
Without
really
a doubt.
Is an art. But, man, Sean Gunn's going to be the next Andy Serkis, man. He's so good at that.
Yes, and but you know, and then you have people like Savant, Michael Rooker, who of course we know from Guardians of the Galaxy as Mary Poppinjaw.
Mary Poppinjaw.
Yondu, and he's playing Savant, and that's actually how we open the movie, with Michael Rooker sitting in his cell, or not his cell, in an outside exercise yard.
On the
after, of course, hearing the I don't know how I want to say this because I'm such a huge fan, but the incomparable Johnny Cash actually kicks this off over the opening sequence. Man, I remember when it first started and I heard those opening twangs of Folsom Prison Blues. I was like, oh, this is going to be different. This is going to be a different movie.
Yep. That song sets the tone so well, man.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
It reminds you that these guys like still got a little good in them. They've made some really bad decisions. Here they are. They got the blues. Like that's what the song did for me. You know.
Yeah, and of course it. You know, opening with that movie instead of something dark and moody, as a lot of the other DCE movies have done, sets the tone right away.
Yeah.
You know, this is going to be a pulpy, you know, kind of pop culture thrill ride. And I think that was wonderfully done. But we open with Michael Rooker as the character Savant in the rec yard. And immediately we are led to believe that this is going to be our main character. And
this is our new Deadshot.
Yeah, this is our new Deadshot. And yeah, the look of the character straight out of the comics. And it was a great, compelling character. So we go through the opening of the scene before we meet any of the other characters, and it's very Savant heavy. And you're led to believe that hey, that's who our new Deadshot is, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, we get to the nitty gritty of it, and now everybody they spend the first 7 or 8 minutes of the movie introducing you to is now dead, including a returning character that we probably all thought would make it through.
Yep, and that is gonna be Miss Harley Quinn you're referring to, correct?
No.
Okay.
Courtney Jai White as Captain Boomerang buys it very early in the film, where most of us would have probably thought he would have made it further. But just that gotcha. This ain't going anywhere where you thought it was going to be was a genius tactic to start this movie.
And made the characters seemingly interesting, charismatic, or strong enough for this not to happen, but it happens. You got the funny, witty scenes where Blackheart's teasing the government agent, whatever he is, SWAT guy. And, you're just like, oh, cool. And Pete Davidson's going to be hilarious in this movie. He's going to provide the comic relief. Javelin's going to be funny to watch. It's going to be ridiculous. The accent's going to grow on you. None of that happens.
No, none of it is given the opportunity to happen. And of course, Gunn foreshadows this when Task Force X exits the plane. One of the genius things to me is the office personnel at Belle Reve. Of course, you've got the straight, sinister Amanda Waller, but the people who are working around her they're hilarious.
Yeah.
The moment Weasel drops in and can't swim, I remember one of my very first big laughs was when the girl turns around and goes, "Did nobody check to see if the weasel could swim?"
I know, man. And it's like, this was like, I don't know if it was supposed to be rushed or if it was just supposed to be like they didn't care to check, which is probably the correct of the two. But that was great. Like, nobody did this. I got big Cabin in the Woods vibes off that staff in that office. Did you get any of that? Pick up on any of that, Frost?
Oh yeah.
It was so Cabin in the Woods, like, like I thought somebody was going to be like, especially when they were betting, it's like, hey, I got 20 on Merman, they were taking bets. I got big vibes, man. I really enjoyed that.
The one beat I think they could have put in there is had they done something where like one of the guys actually knew he couldn't swim and had actually bet for him to be the first one to die.
Yeah.
Like he set him up to die just to win the bet.
Just to win a couple of bucks at the office, have bragging rights at the office at the water fountain.
I told you the weasel would die first.
As he hides the piece of paper saying Weasel can't swim in his pocket.
Oh yeah, but thought we wouldn't notice, but we did.
We did.
But that dynamic is a great dynamic in the movie. And one of the beautiful things about this, before we actually get to our review, is how there's these little set pieces scattered everywhere. You've got Harley and her little story that's running through it, and then you've got the original Task Force X and their story running through it. Mm-hmm. And then you have the office pool and they get their moments throughout the film. And then you have the thinker and his moments throughout the film. And all of these flow into a cohesive narrative in spite of itself.
Man, what? Well said. Well said.
And I think that's one of the things that really drove the movie and kept me entertained, because too often in today's cinemascape, if you will, I feel like movies get too predictable, and there seems to always be that moment that kind of drags for whatever purpose. And I can honestly say this is one of the first movies that didn't have a single moment where I was like, oh, let's get to the next action sequence.
Dude, exactly.
They always put something in there to entertain you.
Yep.
So that I feel like is the genius of the movie.
Yep. I don't want to jump too ahead, but the only time that if I had to force myself to think were anything like that, it was the great, the laughter, the music, everything was going good. And you're like, okay. And then shoots the king shark just vibing in the car by himself, listening to music, and you just laughing you're like, oh, King Shark, I wish you could go inside and not blow their cover.
Yeah.
It makes you feel bad for the character to be like, oh, you get excited to see him,
and when you bring that moment up, that brings us back to another thing Gunn seems to do in all of his movies. We've already talked about Michael Rooker and Gunn's brother being in the film. He's also got so many people from the Guardians of the Galaxy series in this. Of course, you have Stallone as King Shark, and he, of course, played Starhawk, one of the Reaver commanders in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yep.
You have all sorts of these little cameos, if you will. Takiwati, or however you say his name. Yeah, Takiwati, whatever. He's in the movie. And obviously he's been in Avengers movies and Thor and will probably soon be in Guardians of the Galaxy, as Korg. But he's in the movie playing Ratcatcher 1, Ratcatcher 2's father. You've got these little cameos peppered in throughout. And one that a lot of people may not have picked up on or just didn't notice is, Palm, whatever her name is, the young lady who plays Mantis in Guardians of the Galaxy. She's actually one of the dancers in the bar there in Cordo Maltese. So, and I'm sure that was one of those things where Gunn was like, hey, we need an extra. You want to come in and be a part of this movie? And,
yeah, man. Yeah. And then when you told me that, I was like, oh my God, it blew me away. I didn't even see that. But I think that attests to how much fun they probably have making these movies with James Gunn. It seems like it's all one big happy family. He's like, hey, you want to come be in this movie I'm making? It's going to be cool. I just want people I love and appreciate and respect to be a part of this. And it's just so cool that he includes that, He's really big on Easter eggs. And that was one I think fans were a day or two, behind on catching. And then somebody spotted it. You spotted it. Awesome just to see another Guardian character in that movie. Was there any more that we haven't touched down on, Frost?
Well, mostly there were some character cameos that people may not have noticed. Of course, you've got Calendar Man. There was a couple of other villain cameos. There was Kaleidoscope.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to. There's another one. It's the guy who has looks like part of his face is ripped off and another part is skin. I can't remember the character's name right off the top of my head, but he's an established character. He wasn't just stuck in there because the makeup looked cool.
Right.
There were some of those. The little, obviously the little creatures that attack King Shark are a little bit of an Easter egg.
Yeah.
So, Gunn likes to stick those things in there. And I think he did a beautiful job with this one.
Man, absolutely. So that's our breakdown of the Easter eggs. So let me ask you this, Ross. What's some of your favorite humor, because the first thing I felt when this movie was over was, man, how much more enjoyable that was than the first one. Enjoyable in every sense, but also the humor was so much better, so much more full of life, so much more inner giggles and outside just straight up laughing I got from watching this. What's some of your favorite humor spots in the entire film?
You know, um, I've got to say, and I'm saying this begrudgingly, uh, but many of my favorite moments in this movie were John Cena centric.
Yeah.
And I am not by any means a John Cena fan. As a matter of fact, I have used many expletives towards Mr. Cena in the past for various reasons. But I will say this. John Cena took this role, and man, he sunk his teeth into it, and he went full send. He became Peacemaker, and he played that character for every bit of comic value he could wring out of it. He didn't take himself too seriously, but at the same time, he let the character take himself too seriously, which was part of the humor. You know, the moment where, and excuse the language, uh, but the moment where this guy says that if he would have to eat a field full of dicks for freedom, he would.
Yeah, he was ready to eat an entire beach full of eggplant emojis. Just to the day of freedom. And that was everything. That's the scene we got from the trailer, but it was so much more fun and laughable. And it's just like, man, somewhere along the lines, someone that made this movie, John Cena didn't sign their kid's autograph or something, and he was like, "All right, if he's going to be in this movie, I've got a line he has to say. If you want me to write this, like." And I know I just want to speak on behalf of Brandon real quick, since we all obviously collectively dislike the person. We're not going to take credit where we're not going to take away credit where it's due for this character that he played and what he delivered. But Brandon, as a matter of fact, gave some, I wouldn't say vulgar, but gave some realistic comments directed towards John Cena about 4 feet away from the guy's face, made John Cena stop in his tracks and stare at him like, how dare you say this realistic stuff about me? And it made him keep walking. We were at a WWE event when he did that. And every time I see John Cena's face, I just laugh about the time that Brandon, who is my brother, made John Cena stop in his tracks and stare a hole through him when I thought a fist fight was going to break out. So, but yeah, man, cannot take credit away where it is deserved. John Cena delivered comedic gold in this with his prison toilet seat on his head. Peacemaker was a character that I don't think this movie would have been. All the pieces wouldn't have been there if John Cena hadn't played this character. I got to say, it was a great casting.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, physically, he obviously filled the role, but just his presence, his
seriousness, his
Yes,
seriousness.
the seriousness he was able to wring out while delivering lines such as, you know, what was it he said? Brown eye is slang for butthole. Do we think that has anything to do with this?
Yeah. It was dead serious set on it, you know?
Oh, yeah, dead serious. You know, and he bought into the character, which I think is one of the great things. I know you and I spoke earlier, and we talked about how, you know, the studio would have to go to Cena's home and get the costume back because he would leave with the costume every day, and he would wear it home and keep it. And you know, and when he bought in, he's done all the rounds of publicity and all this, wearing he's done, you know, interviews as Peacemaker, not John Cena, as Peacemaker. And I think that is the genius of this this particular film, and like I said, I'll give credit where credit was due. Cena definitely brought something to this film that it would have lacked had he not been there.
He did, man. He brought straight up ruthless comedic aggression, and I'll give him credit for it. It was very well delivered.
One moment, not to interrupt.
Oh, you're good.
But one moment, since you asked me what some of my favorite comedic moments were, the one moment for me with Peacemaker that made me spit my drink out, it was a literal spit take, was the moment where they're going through the Freedom Fighters camp, and him and Bloodsport are basically having a competition of who they can kill and how fast and what. And he comes to the guy sleeping there on the table, and he just starts at his toes and just starts rapid fire chopping him with the axe as fast as he can, just as he's walking by, like all the way up the guy's body.
Yeah, man. Like he's adding items in a shopping cart. Like, it's just hilarious the way he does it. Like, and straight up Gimli Legolas confrontation battle to see who can get the most kills there. It's just straight up nonsense how he overkills that. And
I was hoping and praying one of them would kill like blow up a building, and the other one would be like still that only counts as one.
Yeah, still only counts as one.
But let me ask you, Sam, if you had to pick one moment out of this film that really sparked joy for you, what moment would that be?
Man, that is going to be hard to narrow it down to one. I'm thinking the one that made me feel kind of more sold, even so than I already was when all that was going on so fast at the same time towards the beginning of the film, where King Shark was trying to eat Ratcatcher number 2. Bloodsport stops her. The rat Sebastian tells her, like, no, it's true. She gets upset. Then you find out about Idris Elba's, like, right before that, you find out about his fear of rats. And when you go back to the whole Cabin in the Woods squad, like, nobody said Bloodsport was had a rat phobia, and like all that was going on. And it was just like the dynamic. You realize there was something special between these people in that moment. And when Bloodsport's talking to Waller, and he's like, you know what, we can't function as a group if we're worried about each trying to kill each other. Also very Task Force X to me. There's always somebody undermining, always somebody doing something for selfish purposes, for self-gain. And it was just like that dynamic. I was like, I was sold even more than I already was on this film, and I was ready to go. I was ready to get into this story, ready to see what this dynamic did. They did not let me down. We've gave Gunn a lot of praise in this, but I do want to give credit to the actors, to the delivery, to the special dynamic that I'm sure, he was cooking and stirring between these guys, offset on the set of the film, everything. But there was something very special amongst these characters that I did not feel in the first film.
Yeah, in the first film, as good as many of the characters were, it never felt like they truly gelled.
No.
And I don't want to say gelled as a team, because that's not what really Task Force X has ever really been about.
Right.
But to me, the actors never really gelled as a performance troupe. In this movie, they do. They seem to have a lot of charisma with each other, and they play off of each other really well. And that brings me probably to the moment that made me pop bigger than any other moment in the film. And for those of you who may not follow wrestling parlance or know what that means, a pop is a moment where there is a sudden outburst of emotion. in wrestling to pop a crowd is to get them to cheer or to roar. Uh, and the moment for me that popped me bigger than any other moment in the film was when Idris Elba, who is quite possibly one of the most grandiose and gravitas filled actors of our age, turns around and looks at King Shark and points at a giant starfish and says, "Nom nom."
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Absolutely. That was very, I don't even know what the right word is, but that sparked a lot of joy. That was a big pop. Because that was like you felt the not only the acceptance but the unity take this thing down, because it was, endangering the lives of men, women, and of course the children, is what everybody decided. Hey, that's the break. Kind of like when Harley ended her engagement rather quick when she says, "You know what? I told myself I was going to do this, and that's a huge red flag. I told myself I'd kill him." When she's sitting there talking to his soon becoming lifeless body as he's bleeding out, carrying that conversation with him was just so everything. I love the fact that they let these other characters breathe. In the last film, it was a lot of Will Smith Harley. It was a lot of Will Smith Harley development. The weird dynamic between the two felt, but getting back to this movie, they let everybody breathe, but Harley's moments were Harley's moments. She claimed ownership of Harley Quinn and were so well delivered, especially like the ones you don't even see coming are so good. Like we have a Milton on our team. I think I'm getting his name right. It might be something else. Like we have a Milton on our team.
No, it was Milton. Yeah.
It was Milton. Okay. Who's Milton? Where's Milton? And then, after they, do their thing with Star, and they're like, she's like, "It's okay. I'll be your friend, Milton." And he's like, "My name's not Milton." And she's like, "Yeah, we just had a whole conversation about it." Like, that was just everything to me. My favorite Harley moment of humor in the film that I love, that I literally laughed out loud, could not stop myself from laughing, is the whole when Flag's telling him the rules, like, "Hey, you know what, Thinker? You are officially in the Suicide Squad. You're a Task Force X, whether you like it or not. If you do this, if you have personalized license plates, you will die." Like, they cracked me up. That got me big.
And the great thing about that was how Flag responded to that. No. Those last three aren't. No, those aren't real.
She just assumes this like title and power. And starts telling this guy, and that was cracking me up, man. But the one that got me even more so than that is when they're like having a serious business conversation, and she just had to chime in and say, "I am pacing back and forth." Like that, it got me, man. It got me. Her spots in this movie were great, man, and I'm truly grateful that none of these characters had to stick around from the first film, but I'm really glad they decided to keep Harley. I'm glad we got to see Flag in the movie as much as we did. He's kind of the moral compass of the film. Very much needed in a world of misfits and ragtag hand-me-down characters. We needed a Rick Flag to be the moral compass of the film. So I'm grateful for that. They decided to keep those two characters around, as long as they did, anyways. In Flag's case.
Yeah. So let's just get down to brass tacks on this, Chubs. We've talked about the things we've loved about the movie, and why don't we delve into a little bit of what we would have liked to have seen done different? Because I know as fans, there's always those things we'd like to see done different.
Sure.
Because a lot of these characters really live in our minds. If you could have changed one thing about this movie, what would it have been?
I have a weird beef, a personal weird beef, but then I have a overall thing that I think our listeners will kind of relate to a little bit more, understand a little bit more, and that's just the Stardo the Conqueror, man. I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more of a build, a little bit more of a backstory. The film could have been, I think it was right at 2:12, 2 hours, 12 minutes. It could have been 2:22 if we'd have got a little bit more Stardo build, a little bit more of him doing the whole villain monologue more. Something a little bit more. And if that wasn't the case, at least give more dark U.S. government somebody to dislike. because you have these such lovable characters. It is an action superhero film. I feel like we needed a better bad guy, which is something that I always will compliment DC on. They have very exceptionally good villains, but Stardo just I feel like the character should have had they should have paid the character himself a little bit more respect and made it more of a serious threat and not just a one big 5-10 minute done battle at the end.
Well, to speak to that, um, essentially Starro is a giant alien starfish that can control minds, and I understand it was a big kaiju monster set piece.
Yeah.
That's fine. I get that. But what a lot of people may not realize, and one of the things that irritated me so much about that, is that Starro in the DCEU, or in the DC Comics universe, as it were, is a Thanos level threat. We're talking about world ending threat. And he was basically made to be little more than, a giant kaiju to be brought down. And that bothered me. But if there was one thing I could change about this movie, other than the Starro thing, I feel like, to me, it would be the death of Rick Flag.
Oh, yeah.
I just feel like, I wish they'd have kept the character around, because, like you said, he is the moral compass of Task Force X. But to me, his death seemed almost anticlimactic.
Yep, I agree with you there, buddy.
I
do.
Just the way it happened. That would be the one thing I would change. But I do agree with you. I feel like Starro could have been more. If they were going to use him simply as what they used him for, I don't see why they didn't just keep some of the star spores, and use them.
Right, because it seems like if you were going to pull a character that might mean something to fans, you would represent that character in a way that would continue to pay homage to the character.
Right.
They could have used the giant spider, as overdone as it is. As long as it's not a giant mechanical spider from Wild Wild West, you could have done something else besides the character. And I am nowhere near as knowledgeable in the DC Comics world as you are, Frost. So I can't imagine what your thoughts were watching this character. It almost felt like we were. Mandarin from Iron Man 3. It was like, whoa, this is a serious thing. Why are they doing this?
Right.
Now we're actually getting the real Mandarin and Shang-Chi.
Well, and who knows? Maybe this is going to wind up being some sort of bait and switch with Starro as well. But I feel like those two things, to me, they in no way take away from the movie.
Right,
but
exactly.
Had those two things been different, they could have added.
Right, and guys, this comes from a place we're both saying, like, we're challenging one another. Like, you have to pick something. Still the movie. We love it. Obviously, we've been, we decided we want to do this, so we love the film. But it's like you got to be fair. You got to dissect it and say what your one beef was. But who knows? That one beef might turn into, they might retcon that and say, oh, you know what? I'm the real Starro. That was my son. I am the real Starro the Conqueror. That was my child that you kidnapped, and we may actually get a real deal Starro the Conqueror one day. Who knows?
But we may do that. But going back now, if we're going to move forward with Task Force X, and this is something I want to talk to you about after we get our reviews done. But I want to give you a little bit of a heads up. Where do we go from here now? We know that the tagline for the movie was "Don't get attached." So where do we go from here with Task Force X?
Man, so when we spoke earlier, something that didn't even come to mind when we were discussing this film before we started our in-play and view review, something that didn't come to mind earlier was, of course, you're going to need to step up the bad guy. You're going to need to step up the threat. You're going to need to step it up. I would almost like to see two Task Force X's in confrontation of some sort. That would, I think that might be interesting for a third movie, but we're going to have to discuss who the key players are, who this new Task Force X is going to be. Whether it is one team or they do decide to do like a double, threat thing where it's like two teams eventually fighting each other, which I think would be enjoyable and entertaining as for all fans to watch. But let's just keep it simple and say that there are, of course, they better if they decide they like having dump trucks of money dropped off their door every day. Let's say Warner Brothers moves forward with Task Force X films. Who is going to be in this next Suicide Squad?
Right. So, I've got some favorites of my own I would love to see. And one of those would be a character that I know is near and dear to both yours and Brandon's heart, and that's Gorilla Grodd.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, when you're looking at the Suicide Squad, there's certain almost character roles that have to be filled. There's of course you've got Harley. She's always going to be there because Margot Robbie owns that role, and I just don't see how we could move forward without.
No,
Harley.
Absolutely not. That's a guaranteed shoe, and I think us and the viewers, listeners alike can agree that Harley has to be the constant of this.
But outside of that, really, it can be a revolving door of characters, but there's always going to be certain roles you need filled. You're always going to have that monstrous muscle that you need that was filled by Killer Croc and King Shark. So I feel like Grodd could fill that role very well.
I think you would too, man. My only concern with that is I really enjoy Grodd as a villain. So, I would love to see Grodd show up. I just feel like Grodd is a character that I personally, I enjoy him more as a villain than, and he does get his back and forth anti-hero roles at times, but he would definitely deliver. If that's the route they decided to go, I would not be opposed to it in any way. I would love to see Grodd show up and mind control the other Task Force X team, as and he just to remind them, like, hey, you know what, I can make you do jumping jacks if I want to. Could you imagine him having control over Harley and making her do something silly?
With that being said, what about if the next Suicide Squad, Grodd is the villain,
all for it,
and we have maybe Salazar, the ruler of Gorilla City, as that monstrous muscle component. The great thing about this this potential series of movies is it can go in so many different directions because we are using characters that exist in the periphery of the DC extended universe.
Exactly, man. It's not like James Gunn's going to sit down with one of the brothers and they're going to be like, well, you know what? We had Grodd planned for the next Superman movie. That's still not going to work. Like, these are all characters that he can make people care about, that we already care about a lot. And yeah, man, I would be so on board. So Warner Brothers, if like Big Frost said earlier, if somebody's cousin's roommate is listening to this that works at Warner Brothers, we want to see Grodd, man. We want to see Grodd in Suicide Squad 3.
And I know when we were speaking earlier, there's so many characters that can fill that role. One of the ones you were talking about earlier was Solomon Grundy.
A man born on a Monday, Solomon Grundy.
Would be a perfect addition to Task Force X.
Absolutely, man.
But with all that being said, it's all fantasy uh, casting or whatever at this point. Uh, so what I would like to at this point do is I'd like to challenge our listeners. Uh, Follow us on social media. Check us out on Instagram at In Plain View Show Official, I
Yep, that's
believe.
it. In Plain View Show Official.
Uh, check us out there. Leave us a comment. Give us your idea for a 5-person team for the next Suicide Squad movie. We'll check all those out, and in our next podcast, we'll mention some of our favorites, and maybe we'll do some fantasy casting on those and see what we could do with those. But we're on Instagram. We're on the Twitter machine. You can follow us there as well as on Facebook.
Absolutely. All you got to do for you Facebook users, all you got to do is search In Plain View. You'll see us. We have some like blue, greenish graffiti style logo that Brandon cooked up for the team. So yeah, guys, please interact. Tell us who you want to see the Suicide Squad, man. If you want to keep some of the same characters, if you want to introduce some characters that you think you're like, why aren't these guys mentioning, the Atom or Killer Frost? Please tell us about it, man, so we can discuss this together, because this is us collectively coming together, nerding out. So nerd out with us.
So yeah, get in contact with us, guys. Let us know what you think. We're coming to that point in the show where we're going to have to get real serious. And Chubz, I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot. Give me your final end-all review of the Suicide Squad.
All right, we're going to try to keep this in about 30 seconds. I'll go ahead and kick it off. I love this movie. I'm going to have to give it a solid 4 out of 5. Would have been a 5 if it wasn't for some of the picks we had. It's a great movie. It's its own thing, and each one of those 4 stars are very earned to everybody involved in this. The score was phenomenal. The music, the soundtrack to this thing is great. I'm a big music guy. I absolutely love that. Everything from the start of Johnny Cash to the last music playing, the songs that Harley were singing, that was important to me, and I really appreciated what they did on that aspect of the film. The movie was hilarious. The humor was 1,000 times better this time around. Real belly laughs come out of me, and it's hard to do that. And you bring comedy, action, superhero, all these different dynamics, to this stage that they have created, and I absolutely love the film, man. So I'm going to go with 4 out of 5, Ross.
I've been thinking about this a lot since we talked earlier, and again, I'm going to try to keep this to about a minute. Really enjoyed the movie. To me, this movie took me back to me and my friends going to the theater on a Saturday afternoon and just getting lost in the fantasy of what cinema could be. It wasn't too heavy. It wasn't too confusing. But it was fun. It was a roller coaster of a movie. So for that, I'm going to have to give it a solid 4.5 stars. The problems I had with this film are so minor, they almost don't warrant inclusion. But I do want to be honest with our listeners and give an honest review. Is it a perfect movie? No. Is it going to win an Academy Award? No. Is it fun? Without a doubt. This is the type of movie for me that I go to the cinema for. This is what I go for. I want a movie that I can go in, I can get my big $20 bucket of popcorn, swimming in whatever that butter oil is, and a big soda, and I can sit there and I can lose myself in modern tentpole blockbuster film. To me, that's what this is. This is me and my buddies reading comics and hanging out on a Saturday afternoon. This, to me, brings back my childhood and what I always dreamed comic book movies could be.
Man, absolutely.
So,
Well said, dude. And I think your rating was perfect. That man, spot on. Kind of got me in my emotions a little bit. that is perfect, man. So, is there anything else you want to add before we close out today, big guy?
no, the only thing I would say is, again, guys, follow us up on all the social media spots as normal. We're out there. We've got a meme page that's pretty good that Chubz keeps updated with some of the freshest pop culture memes going on. Hang with us. This is our first show back, and we're definitely going to be coming at you with more movie reviews, more pop culture conversations, possibly even some skits in the future. One that was floated today in a production meeting, we're looking at maybe producing a skit of Sheldon Cooper reviewing and disparaging the Joker movie because, like we said before, Joker sucks. So stick with us on that. Follow us up on all the normal medias and hang out with us, interact with us. We are doing this not only for ourselves but for you guys because these are the things in our lives that give us meaning and purpose. You know, the pop culture world is our new mythology, and I don't feel like enough people give it enough credit for that. We need to keep these things alive and to pass them on and make them live. And that's what we're here to do. So join us on our journey, and we're going to try to entertain you and hopefully maybe make you think a little bit and give you some information you might not have had before you listen to a bunch of geeks who have no life.
Absolutely, man. Well said, Frost. Well said. Guys, I just want to say real quick, What If is coming right around the corner. So I do want to give a soft plug for that. We will be discussing and reviewing the Marvel What If episodes over on Disney Plus each week. So just stay tuned. Keep up with us. Those will be dropping shortly after the episode. So, guys, we just want to say much love to you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. And before we close, just remember that if rats have purpose, then so do we all. Live fast and die clown, guys. Thanks for listening.
And until next time, the balcony is closed.